Steve Bannon, or as he's now called because of President Trump, and I'm not going to lie, this made me laugh for a solid 5 minutes straight, almost to the point of tears. Sloppy Steve Bannon. I love that nickname. He went on Bill Maher's show, and they went back and forth on the issue of populism. So let's watch this, and then I have quite a bit to say about it.
The signal that was sent with the tax cut didn't reach your base. Reality won.
Bill.
Reality won once because, wait a second, they know that tax cut, 83% of it, went to the top 1%. They know that, and they don't like it. And what happens...
Hang on. I was the guy in the Oval Office that was pushing a 44% tax rate for those over $5 million, and to take the $3 trillion that were repatriated and make sure there were different tax structures so it would be vested in plant and equipment in inner cities. Now, the overall tax plan, I think, works for workers, and here's why. You've got to look at it in context of our economic war with China. You can't separate the tariffs and what he's doing on the 301s, what he's doing on trying to stop intellectual property theft and appropriation from the taxes. The taxes principally were to make our companies competitive with Germany and China. The personal tax rates, which I didn't totally agree with, right, because there's more of the trickle down, is something that had to be used to get this thing passed. But the central part of it was the corporate tax cuts.
But isn't that what a con man does? He said, I'm going to look out for you, the common man, the forgotten American. And then he gets in there and tries to steal their health care to pay for the tax cut for the rich people. How is that being honest to the pledge of doing it for the little guy?
Because the central part of this bill was bringing manufacturing jobs back from East Asia. And that's what he's doing. The tax cuts for corporations make them competitive with China and Germany. The tariffs are part of an economic war that China has foisted upon us for the last 25 years. And this is all of whole cloth. And that's why it's working. He's reorienting, Bill, the world supply chain right now with China.
I've gone as far as I can to get you on this. Next question. Some of populism, isn't some of that isn't that racism masquerading?
Look in Italy right now. You got the Five-Star Movement, you got the League. The Five-Star Movement is so green they don't want a bullet train, okay? They're the populist movement, and they're even saying, hey, we got to stop the migrant issue because they're the ones who want to give a guaranteed income. Populism is not based on racism, right?
Back.
It's based on the little guy, guy having a voice, who you are always saying should have a voice.
Yes.
You're actually a populist.
Okay.
So Steve Bannon is tricky because Steve Bannon has, honestly, a solid history of bigotry, and now he does, like, the tap dance. I just noticed Kim Jong-un and Trump are above my shoulder. Wrong. Time to change that. Steve Bannon does a tap dance now where when he's, in the Lion's Den on Bill Maher show or when he's on some mainstream media outlet, he's not totally upfront and honest about his real beliefs on immigration. So I'm gonna lay them out for you because I think they're important. First of all, he says his favorite book is this book called Camp of the Saints. The book Camp of the Saints is almost openly a racist book. I mean, it's like, the mass migration from third world countries is destroying the West, and they have insane caricatures and stereotypes of brown people in those books. Now you could say, well, whatever, that's just a book. How does that reflect on his policies? All you need to know about his opinion on immigration is what he said actually in an interview with Trump back on his radio show when Trump was a candidate. He said to Trump was arguing like, oh yeah, we got to get tough. We got to build the wall. It's going to be tremendous. It's going to be unbelievable. And we need to make sure we have legal immigration. Forget the illegal immigration. We need a merit-based system, and we need legal immigration. And so that, is a right-wing position. But when you dive down into it, it's not as bad as what Bannon's response was, because Bannon said, basically, we shouldn't even have legal immigration. And, Trump was like, well, what about, say, the Indian doctor who is contributing to society, and they came here the proper way, legally, whatever, fill out all the paperwork, and they are contributing to society in an important way, and it's a merit-based system, so we're bringing the best from around the world, so to speak. And Steve Bannon's response was like, well, it's more than about what their profession is. You're trying to create a culture. So in other words, he was very clear in the interview, I don't even support a merit-based immigration system. I just want to stop the immigration. So in other words, even if you're like a highly educated brown person who's a professional, lawyer, doctor, whatever, I don't want you in here because you're not white. I don't know what else to call that but bigotry. Isn't that like the definition of bigotry? No matter what, I don't want brown people here. That was his argument. And even Trump in the interview was like, because even Trump, and I do think Trump is a bigot, at least to an extent. Even he was like, he wasn't sure he agreed with that. That's extreme, because that's, when it really boils down to it, that's like white nationalism. So, what you need to understand is, if that's your position, and that is Steve Bannon's position, he claims he's a populist, but you're not a populist. That's not populism. Populism is support for the concerns of ordinary people. That's the definition. So if you're a populist, you support that which is popular among the people. You know who the real populists are? And this is actually a point Obama made back when he was in office, and I don't think Obama's a populist, to be clear. But he said the real populist is Bernie Sanders. That's right. Bernie Sanders is the real populist. Medicare for all, 70% support now among the American people. Free college, 58% support now among the American people. Living wage, 80% support to raise the minimum wage among the American people. Ending the wars, only 17% of Americans still want to be in Afghanistan, so they want to end the Afghanistan war. And that 17% number was back in 2013. It's probably even lower now. That's another thing deeply populist. Legalize marijuana, 60% of the American people want to do that. Bernie Sanders proposed legislation to do that. So when you go issue for issue, the real populist is Bernie Sanders, and it's the left wing, the populist left wing. So not the corporate people, the corporate Democrats, the establishment Democrats. The establishment is obviously not populist by definition, but the actual left, those are the real populists. You're not you could say Steve Bannon is a fake populist because in a limited scope, on some of the economic issues, he goes, okay, fine, we'll go slightly left. But then if your stance is effectively, and this isn't a straw man, it really is when you diving deep into Bannon's record, when your position is no brown people, there's nothing at all that's populist about that. That's just bigoted. So this is why I say the way you beat the fake populists on the right, it's the real populists on the left. Now, he gave you a hint there as to like what his whole deal is on the economic stuff too, because he says, well, I was the guy in the administration arguing for closing the tax havens and doing repatriation. I was the guy who was arguing for a 44% top marginal tax rate. So that's him saying, see, I am a populist. This is what the people would want. That is true. That is what the people want. But weird how all the things he mentioned didn't make it into the bill. In fact, none of it made it into the bill. None of it. So when, I don't know if you guys remember, but when the Republicans were creating their platform, Donald Trump successfully got in there, bring back Glass-Steagall. Hoop was pushing him to get that in there. This guy. But notice, not only have they not brought back Glass-Steagall, they've deregulated everything in sight. They've even gotten rid of the few remaining provisions of Dodd-Frank, and they totally handcuffed to the point where it doesn't even exist anymore, basically, effectively, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So weird, Steve. All of the things that were the economically populist things that you claim to support, none of them made it into the bill. None of them. So he says, 44% top marginal tax rate. That'd be great. Close the tax havens. That'd be great. And then he says, well, look, the trickle-down needed to be in this bill in order to get it passed. Well, then but trickle-down is literally the fundamental opposite of populism. Trickle-down is elitism. Trickle-down is serving the establishment and screwing over working people. So it's like saying, what do you mean? I had to do the exact opposite of what I wanted to do in order to get what I want. That makes absolutely no sense. I had to do the opposite of populism because I'm a populist. I had to put in the trickle-down in order to get it passed. That makes no sense, Steve. And then the final point is, listen, on the tariff stuff and the protectionism stuff, I've spoken about this before. I would say, personally, I lean more on the side of protectionism than so-called free trade. Because free trade it's just a ruse to outsource jobs so you can enrich executives and corporations and billionaires while you screw over working people. So I'm no free trader. I despise that shit. I lean in the direction of protectionism, as I've spoken with you guys about before, time and time again. But what Steve Bannon is not acknowledging here, and it's sad that Bill Maher didn't respond with this, is even if you say, okay, I agree with you in principle on tariffs and protectionism and standing up to China and all that stuff, there's been a net job loss with Trump's tariffs. So there are particular specific industries where they've had some net job creation. I think steel workers is one example of that. Okay, fine, good. I support that. But overall, there's actually been a net job loss. So you have to understand something, guys. The whole point of bringing back one degree or another, one level or another of protectionism and moving away from free trade, the whole point is supposed to be return manufacturing jobs to the U.S., make us a manufacturing hub again. That's the whole point. But if the net result of the way you're doing this is actually net job losses, which it is with Trump's administration, then you failed. It's like with the war on drugs, how they say, oh, we're going to do the war on drugs and we're going to eliminate drug use. Not only did you not eliminate it, you didn't even decrease it. If anything, it increased. Maybe it stayed the same, but it probably increased. So if that was your goal, then you failed. If your goal in doing economic nationalism, as he calls it, was to create more manufacturing jobs, you failed. You failed. You didn't do it. You failed. So that's an important point, and that's not brought up. Okay? So I think that's my breakdown of Steve Bannon. He claims the mantle of populism, but he's not really a populist. He's not really a populist. And his beliefs on immigration, and let me be clear about something. I'm not of the belief that, first of all, I don't believe in open borders, okay? And second of all, I understand that there's a range of opinions on immigration that I think is reasonable. So there's a range. Somebody might be, oh, you're to the right of me on immigration, but I don't consider you unreasonable. Or some people might be, oh, they're to the left of me on immigration. Okay, but I don't consider you unreasonable. I think you're well within the spectrum of that which is respectable. Okay? A guy like Steve Bannon is not within that spectrum. He's way outside of that spectrum. If you're at the point, if you can't even say, I'm for a merit-based system, and of course you can have brown people who are professionals, if you can't even take that position, well, then you're obviously a bigot. What the fuck else do you want me to call you? Your whole point is I don't want any brown people. What the fuck am I supposed to do with that information? You're a fucking bigot. Sorry, it's the reality of the situation. Sorry, it is what it is, man. That's what you are. And then don't go fucking crying when somebody accurately calls you out. He's straw manning me. Pipe down with your snowflake feelings. It's just the objective description of the reality of it. So, this is who he is. He's a fake populist. Somewhat there on the economic stuff, but then shockingly, none of it actually gets done, and the stuff that is done isn't even done right, and it has the opposite effects. And then, when your whole thing is more about the fucking white nationalism, you ain't doing it right, son. That ain't it, as people are saying nowadays. That ain't it. And as I've argued from the beginning, and I think this should be the case, and we should really go all in on this, the left needs to really steal that mantle of populism, because we're the real populists. If you're on the left, if you're not a corporate Democrat, not an establishment Democrat, not like wafflingly and maddeningly centrist / moderate, if you're on the left, you're a populist, because you're for all the things that the American people are in favor of. You support the concerns of ordinary people. You're the populist. This guy's not the real populist. Keep that in mind.